Hi, everyone. I'm Utkarsh, the founder of Network Capital. Thrilled to have Ravi Venkatesan with me. Ravi has written a fascinating new book and has a portfolio of careers. And today, we're going to dive deep into some of the principles that he advances in the book, which has a fascinating title. Ravi, tell us about the book and the title, um, What the Heck Do I Do with My Life? It resonates so strongly with Network Capital because one of our most popular fellowships is I Don't Know What I'm Doing, What I Want to Do with My Life fellowship. So, Ravi, welcome to Network Capital. Tell us a bit about yourself. What are you doing right now? And why did you write the book?
Cool. Hey, it's a delight to be back in conversation with you, Utkarsh. I think the last time we did this was more than a year ago. So
Yeah.
thanks for having me back. I wasn't sure you would after the last one. So yeah. Hello everyone. I wrote this book because it's a question that has challenged and vexed me many times in my life. So if you're feeling this, realize that you're not alone. I just turned 59 last week, so I'm sort of dating myself. But I would say with some sort of candor that for 40 of these 59 years, I've been toying with this question. And the thing is, it comes up every few years for most people. Now, some people, are born with great clarity of what their life is all about. I'm a writer, I'm a teacher, I'm a you know programmer, whatever it is. It wasn't so for me. There were times when I had clarity about the next phase, but then invariably, every 5, 7 years, this question came up. And then I realized, Utkarsh, in the last decade or so, that the world is actually getting way more complicated. There are just so many factors which are converging, um, be it technology or the fact that there's just so many new ideas about the way we want to organize ourselves and the planet, which is resulting in lots of contention, polarization, hatred, all those kinds of things, fanned, of course, by crazy wacko leaders everywhere. Then and there are bewildering choices now, just bewildering choices. When I was really young, which was some time ago, admittedly, uh, choices were really clear. Okay, if you were smart growing up in, at least in India, and it was true to some extent in some parts of the world, you had to be an engineer if you were smart, or a doctor. And as a consolation prize, you could, be a scientist or a chartered accountant, but that was distinctly the next rung. And then you were basically a loser. Okay, so it was very clear. If you wanted the respect of your family and friends and all that, you had to study really hard and be one of these things. Well, fortunately, I think the world has changed, and there's a infinite variety of things we can do. But the problem with that choice is you have to make those choices.
Yeah.
And the other thing that has changed substantially is the nature of work. Um, I distinctly remember that when I was graduating from Harvard Business School, this is 1992, the very last day, they called us in and gave us career a lesson on careers, and the guy said, "Look, this job security where you enter a tunnel and emerge 40 years later, that's not going to happen for you guys. Okay, you'll have to change at least 2 or 3 jobs, and that's the tough news." Well, today, the world has changed to the point where I don't think jobs exist. Okay, the idea of a stable job which you can count on, and then it leads to another stable job with the same employer, and then a nice career. It's relevant to a vanishingly few number of people. I
Hmm.
think more and more of us will have to learn to figure out how to, you know, stand on our own feet, be entrepreneurs or freelancers or gig workers, which I think you've successfully done and I've done successfully at a later date.
Hmm.
And so, but this all is very good, but it sounds terrifying to some people who were not used to it. And so I began to realize through my talking and writing on LinkedIn, etc., that there is this deep chord of anxiety, this and confusion, bewilderment, etc. Lots of people at different life stages, at 20, at 35, at when the midlife crisis hits in your 40s, people in their approaching retirement at 60, they all have the same question. Obviously the answer varies a lot depending on what life stage you are, the specific circumstances, but I felt that there were some generalizable ideas
Hmm.
that might be useful, and so I decided to start writing this book. And I never realized it would be so fiendishly complicated to write such a book. And it would take 4 or 5 years to accomplish this. But there it is. That was the motivation.
Right. How did you choose the title?
Great. Look, the title is, sorry, I must put, was what the heck? It was actually going to be WTF, but then I realized that won't be too good for my reputation. And this was only going to be the working title.
Hmm.
So when I, started working with a publisher, and I said, okay, this is a working title, and we'll change it. And as the whole thing emerges, the narrative, the stories emerge. But then, as we got to the very end, we couldn't think of anything better. And yeah, so it stayed. The subtitle is "How to Flourish in Turbulent Times," but really, this is the question. And the book's been out for about 2 weeks, and there's a tremendous amount of conversation about this, particularly on LinkedIn, which anyway is
Right.
my core audience. It's working professionals of all sorts, and it's really the title, the subject is really resonating. I think this is the one of the central questions of our time.
100%. So, Ravi, when one looks at your career and your large body of work, one would think that you have figured out a lot more than other people. But as the author of the book, perhaps there is a deeper story that your resume does not reflect. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, what the look, if you just read my resume, it looks like, oh, hey, this guy's, you know, different. He's sorted. He knows what he's doing, uh, and there's just this singular string of sequential successes.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what it comes out. Yeah.
yeah, that's not the truth. What it doesn't tell is the struggle to figure things out for myself, and that's what there's one thing that we communicate to this audience, that it should be that it's life is a struggle, and the central struggle is actually to answer this question: why am I here, and what am I supposed to do with this life? And I've struggled mightily, just like many, if not most. I've perhaps been more intentional about it than many. Um, but no, what it doesn't tell is the many things I tried that didn't work, the
Hmm.
things, what I was hoping to be in my life that I wasn't. But what you do is, there's a wonderful old book from the 50s by Dale Carnegie. He said, look, if life hands you a lemon, make lemonade. And I love that. I just love that. So, for instance, just to give you a simple story, in 2011, I walked out of Microsoft. You spent some time in that company as well, and had a good 8 year stretch there. But I was determined about just one thing: I'm not going to be an employee again. I'm not going to
Hmm.
answer to some manager. I'm not going to be on some bozo calls explaining things to people. I'm done with that. I had no clear roadmap for what I wanted to do with my life. So I said, okay, fine. Let me try lots of things. Okay. So let me just experiment with many, many things. And I did. So one of the things I wanted to do was bring another hugely successful company to India.
Hmm.
This time, not as the country manager like I was at Microsoft, or before that at other places, but as an entrepreneur. So
Hmm.
I said, okay, let me try. First attempt was Salesforce. Salesforce was really doing poorly in India. So I reached out and said, look, why don't I help you to build Salesforce in India? But I want equity, and you eventually I'm happy to, sell back to you once we build something substantial. The talks advanced to some stage. At least they didn't laugh at me. But eventually it didn't work out. Then I tried to bring Amazon to India. This is like 2013.
Hmm.
Those days I was, Narayan Murthy was a good friend and great mentor. So I said to Mr. Murthy, look, they need an Indian partner because of the FDI rules and retail. Why don't we, you know, become the partners? I'll provide the know-how of building a multinational in India and navigating all that. That was my last book. You provide the equity from the Indian perspective, and they bring all the know-how of their business. So he said, good idea, let's do it. And so we started conversations with Bezos and team. But the next thing you know, they realized they didn't need me. Okay, so Catamaran Ventures and Amazon got together, but there wasn't really any need for me. I'm just being very honest about things I tried that didn't work out. I was going to do a startup selling cloud services to SMEs. And I had a fantastic team of my colleagues from Microsoft, and we got funded. And then I realized the only reason I was doing this is because everybody else had the startup passion, but I wasn't passionate. So I said, wrong reason to do a startup.
Hmm.
Um, it was just the fear of missing out, or FOMO, or the herd mentality, whatever you call it. So, what my resume will not tell you is the struggle, um, and the many things I tried that didn't work out, not just in work life. I didn't get married till I was 47. So, it took me a long time to figure out who I wanted to spend my life with, and so many other things. So, it's okay to experiment. That's what life is about. And eventually, hopefully, you will figure out why you're here.
Understood. No, thank you, Ravi, for your candor and for explaining this with such clarity. When you experienced a wide range of, let's say, transformation or tectonic events in your life, who did you turn to for counsel? And what's one thing you wish you knew when you were going through these turbulent times?
One of the things that I intuitively did well in the beginning is I rarely made important decisions on my own.
Hmm.
Uh, I would consult a set of people. I didn't always do what people said, but I would get multiple perspectives and then eventually decide for myself. This is just something I did. And, whether it was buying something expensive like a house or a car, or the most vivid example I can give is Microsoft. So 2003, I'd spent 16 years building diesel engines for a wonderful company called Cummins. I was right at the top. And then there was this opportunity to join Microsoft. 2003 was when Microsoft was at the height of its um, power. But it also was the Facebook of its time, kind of radioactive in its reputation. So I was incredibly drawn to this adventure and the opportunity, but I was also quite, um, shall I say, concerned about failure. At that time, the culture was really nasty, and not saying anything Satya hasn't said already. And so I went around talking to people, and almost unanimously, people said, "Don't do it." So I went to Nandan Nilekani, who was a mentor, and he said, "No,
Hmm.
don't do it. For, it's a tough culture, and also you don't know anything about IT. It's going to end badly."
Hmm.
I asked my family. They said, "Don't do this. Everything is cozy at Cummins. Why would you want to
Hmm.
take wacko risk?" So 9 out of 10 people said don't, but they gave me various good reasons for it. And eventually I said, forget all that, I'm going to do it. And, and the reason I did that was I said, when I turned 50, I was 40 then. I said, when I turned 50, which will I regret more? Having taken on this opportunity and been sacked for incompetence, or not having had the courage to try at all. And I said, let me go in there, and it's okay. I'll treat it as a project.
Hmm.
That's a whole different subject. So what I'm trying to say is, I eventually stumbled on this idea that you should assemble your personal board of directors
Hmm.
and consult them for the decisions that are truly important and irreversible. And that has served me well. Not that I haven't made mistakes, but I think I've made most of these important decisions more intentionally with a wider array of perspectives and advice. And that's something I would encourage everyone to work on. Who are the 5, 10, 15 people of various different types who you can count on for sound advice? Not that you will always agree with it and listen to them, but great perspectives.
Right. Ravi, how does one go about building that board of directors? You allude to it in your book, the latest one, but could you give us some techniques and mental models?
Look, I worry about techniques because then, s- in a certain sense, it's not techniques but a way of being.
Hmm.
And little I know of you, you embody that, which
Hmm.
is you enjoy people, you connect with them, even if it's brief. There's a visceral connection, and that that short encounter leaves both sides saying, "Yeah, that was I enjoyed it, and I hope we meet again."
Hmm.
Okay, so this is the second or third time only that we're meeting, although we've had some exchanges on
Yeah.
email. But I enjoyed every one of my interactions with you, and I'd say, yeah, I hope I do more things with Utkarsh again. So it's about creating that feeling, and when you do that, as you go through life, you start meeting many people, and then you say, look, I really want um, to I really admire that person. I want to be more like them. I wish I could have them as a mentor or whatever.
Hmm.
And through my life, I've done that. Right. So I talked about, for instance, Narayan Murthy and Nandan as good examples, and there were the professors, different places, other sorts of people over the years I've met. And so you don't go around calling them mentors. When somebody approaches me and say, "Hey, Ravi, will you be a mentor?" I feel like fleeing because
Hmm.
it sounds formal with a time commitment and all that. If I just enjoy meeting that person, and then tomorrow they say, "Hey, can I have 15 minutes of your time?" and I just want some advice. 9 times out of 10, I will make the time. Okay, so this is what I'm saying. I think what is most important is try to make an authentic connection
Hmm.
with everybody you meet. Then figure out people who you admire for some reason, and then create a little virtual directory of these
Right.
people. And then tomorrow, as the issue comes up, you say, "Who's relevant from my little directory?" and
Hmm.
uh, and you approach them. Does that make any
Yeah.
sense, or is this sounding weird?
No, it makes perfect sense. It's about intentionality, and you're absolutely right. Some of the people who've managed to build personal board of directors genuinely enjoy making a connection, adding specific value to other people. And I think it's a lot more organic than it is perhaps deliberate. Maybe it's a bit of both. I'm not sure. But
No, it's very organic. The moment this deliberateness comes in, we human beings are very intuitive. So the
hmm,
other person's also able to sense, oh, this Ravi, he wants something.
hmm,
Okay, he's trying to build his network, and most people don't really enjoy that. So
yeah,
I think just being in the moment and connecting. And then over time, you can figure out, oh, so and so is a great person. I'd love to spend more time with them or ask them a question or whatever it is. But I wouldn't say it's, yeah, this intentionality has more downside than upside.
Understood. Ravi, talk to me about micro experiments that you've
Yeah,
done to figure out what the heck are you doing with your life, or what the heck are people doing with their lives.
that's a wonderful point. You know, there's a metaphor that Deng Xiaoping, the old premier of China, used to use, which I love, and I've got it in at least one or two places in my book, which is he says, you have to cross the river by feeling your way across the stones. He says, when there's a powerful river and it has currents, places where it's just suddenly very deep, okay, you can't cross it like there's a bridge over it. You have to feel your way. You've got a stick, and you make sure that you don't. It's not you're not falling into something, and you feel your way across the stones, etc., etc., and eventually, in some random zigzag way, you'll get to the other side. And I think in many many situations in life, that too in our turbulent or VUCA world, as we call it,
Hmm.
we don't. We have a sense of I want to go get there, but I don't know how to get there. And so you have to feel your way. And that's the micro experiments that you're talking about. So, for example, 2011, I was very interested in the development sector or the social sector. I said, look, I'm 47 years old. I've made some money, enough for my needs. I'd love to make more. But that's not the most important thing. I want to take on a major problem of the world and devote my all my energies, talent to it. But I couldn't figure out how to get started. So one of the experiments I started was creating an organization just in Bangalore called Social Venture Partners. I realized there were many people like me in Bangalore who have had some success and now at a point in life where they want to contribute to society but don't know how to get started, where to get started. So I said, look, one of the best things we can do is create this community of like minded people who are searching. So
Hmm.
we call it, so based on a Seattle model, we started Social Venture Partners in Bangalore. And that turned out to be quite successful. So we started it in Bombay and Pune and Delhi, etc. And now it's in many cities. But that was a terrific experience. Okay, not had no idea that it would lead to this. That then got me thinking about, okay, well, the problem I really want to focus on is young people and entrepreneurship. That resulted in my starting the NGO I now run called GAME, Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship. Next thing you know, I'm out there in New York pitching UNICEF for funding for GAME. And Henrietta Ford, the director of UNICEF, says, why don't you do this for UNICEF globally? So I said, I won't join you because I don't want to work in a bureaucracy, but give me some authority and resources and let's do it. So that's how I became UNICEF special representative for young people. And that's what we're trying to build around the world. That's led to what I'm about to do next in climate change, which is the Global Energy Alliance. All I'm saying is micro experiments can lead to unintended consequences of a very positive sort. You don't know where it's going to lead, but it's
Right.
important to experiment. At the same time, my micro experiments in doing a startup myself, a commercial startup, gave me the self knowledge that that's not really what floats my boat. Okay.
Hmm.
So, I aborted that experiment after some time. Okay. So, not everything is going to succeed in the way you intend, but everything, whether it succeeds or doesn't succeed in the way you want, gives you information. It gives you
Right.
information about pathways that are open to you. It gives you information about yourself. What are you really good at? What do I really enjoy, etc. So these micro experiments are powerful. And by the way, that's exactly what Gandhiji did and describes in his book, My Experiments with Truth. Okay. He's doing lots of experiments, both to discover the nature of the world and about himself.
Right.
So this is something I highly encourage all people to do. And by the way, I describe it quite a lot in the book.
Yeah. I think that is one of my favorite sections of the book, the importance of micro experiments. Interestingly, Ravi, even in the fellowship that we run, I don't know what I want to do with my life fellowship, there is an entire module where we actually have our students and fellows go and do a micro experiment to see whether they enjoy it, don't enjoy it, whether something floats their boat or not.
Beautiful. By the way, that means you need to be promoting this book a lot more with your folks after this. I didn't know you're running a program called, but what I wanted to say is, look, there will be times in our life where you're clear you don't want to do what you're doing. Okay, you cannot stand it anymore. But there's a paycheck, you don't know what else you could be doing. And so you just grit your teeth and try to, stick it out and hope it'll get better. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the time when you want to do these micro experiments, because mostly you can't think your way to the future. You have to experiment your way to that future. Okay. And for that, you don't have to quit your job. Okay. If you need that paycheck to feed the family or whatever it is, that's fine. You can do a lot of these experiments on your own time. You can take a sabbatical, you could be doing things on weekends and so on and so forth. So that is a very low risk, smart way when you're feeling stuck to do these micro experiments and find your next gig.
Yeah. So absolutely, Ravi, we plan to make your book actually part of our curriculum. We run two programs focused on, not knowing. One is the I don't know what I want to do with my life fellowship. And the other is a new program we're starting called the Career Restart, which is basically for people who are trying to get back into the workforce. And again,
Yeah.
micro experiments are so important. And you've written an entire book on it. So yeah, it'll be part of the curriculum.
Yeah, more than written a book, I've lived it. Okay. So one of the reasons why it was so difficult to write this book is I didn't go around interviewing 20 successful people and said, here's their formula.
Yeah.
This is my lived experience. So I said, look, if I haven't lived this and sorted it out for myself, I have no business, you know, recommending these ideas. So yeah, so this is something I've lived, and therefore I'm fairly confident. Um, and by the way, talking about re-entering the workforce, it's a really bad idea to come back to the workforce. Um, as you know, you've written a lot about the passion economy and finding your passion. And truly, if there's, there are one of four or five messages in my book, it is the faster you're able to find the intersection of what you're good at, what you love doing, and what the world values, the better off you are. Okay. Um, you really don't want to be part of some workforce. You don't really want to be in a job for any longer than you absolutely need to. I think there's a way better way to organize and live your life, which is entirely within the grasp of certainly anybody who's tuning into this conversation.
Yeah. Ravi, when I look at your work life, generally, I think you've built a portfolio of careers. You've done a wide range of things, many experiments. Um, do you think building a portfolio of careers is going to be the exception or the norm in the times to come?
Totally the norm. If the way I've lived my life sounds exceptional, it's that's just this moment. In 5 years and then 10 years, I think more and more people are going to be living this way than the other way. And there's just so many reasons, Utkarsh, why that is so, right? So one reason is just longevity. The
Hmm.
reality is, at least where in most reasonable parts of the world, people are living longer. And while that's generally good news, it also has problems. if you live to be typically 90, then the idea of retiring at 60 and going and living on a golf course or a beach for 30 years is crazy. Okay,
Hmm.
you want to be engaged, you want to be productive. Of course, you want to be much more in control of your time, so you can play golf when you want to, but you do also want to be engaged and relevant and productive. But nobody is going to touch a 50-year-old or a 60-year-old, let alone a 70-year-old. So you've got to figure out, how what you're going to do and how you're going to feed yourself and so forth. And that's the compounding challenge is that jobs are changing so fast, the nature of skills and knowledge is changing so fast, so you've got to reinvent yourself. Okay, so that's one thing that's happening. You see the amount of turbulence that's buffeting companies, and so more and more of them are moving to much more flexible workforce where there's a small core, and then more and more people are working on contracts as consultants, as gig workers, of advisors, so on and so forth. All these flexible contracts, and now particularly after the pandemic, remotely. So I just think that these trends are very powerful. They've accelerated in these last 2 years. And so we're all going to have to learn much sooner than later how to live our lives. And we're going to have to integrate enjoying life, being productive and earning a living, and learning, all these three agendas, all along the way. So it used to be we lived this very simple three-stage life. I described that also in the book. You study till you're 20, you earn till you're 60, and then you retire and enjoy till you die. Now you're going to have to do all three at the same time, and
Hmm.
which means you need to have a portfolio of things that you do at any time. Some things pay you money, some things you do for impact, other things you do for enjoyment, yet other things you do just for the joy of learning. So that's how I've been living my life for the decade, and I find it's very joyous and very sustainable.
Yeah. Ravi, I think as people build their portfolio of careers, the role of education also changes. So you maybe have to reinvent the way education institutions are structured. Maybe companies need to change. Maybe people need to self-learn a lot more. Maybe communities become important. What's your perspective?
First of all, education system in any part of the world hasn't changed fundamentally in several hundred years.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. And as I write about in the book, it's designed for a world that no longer exists. The world it is designed for is much more stable. Information is precious, so you have to learn a lot of information, and it teaches obedience, compliance, and all these sorts of things, fitting in. The world we're living in and going into is completely the opposite. Information is abundant. Any child with a cell phone can find all the world's information. So, what you need to be able to do is find information, but it's there. You need to be able to be entrepreneurial and problem solve and figure stuff out. That's not taught out there. Um, in fact, one of the worst things is the education system in most parts of the world is training us to be at the very things that software is better at.
Hmm.
Okay. And so it's churning out people who are eminently replaceable by AI. Okay. So this is the issue. Now, people have tried and including Bill Gates, after having spent many billions of dollars, when I met him in 2018, he says that all I know is what doesn't work. I can't tell you what works. So it's notoriously hard to fix education systems. They're very resistant to change. So, what I think, let's not worry about fixing education systems or even corporate learning. Let's
Hmm.
focus on how we take care of ourselves as individuals. So, the
Yeah.
focus of my book is not how education systems must evolve. How should companies retrain their workforce? I don't give a about these things. What I care about is what can an individual do to help themselves?
Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of that is experiential learning. So my focus in particular is on what I call crucible experiences, taking
Hmm.
on every now and then a significant new challenge completely outside your comfort zone, and in the process of which you completely reinvent yourself. You get self-confidence, you increase your learning agility, you develop leadership skills, problem solving skills, and so on and so forth, all the things you need
Hmm.
to flourish in the new world. So I would worry less about what India needs to do or Britain needs to do about the educational system. I'd focus more on what should I be doing.
Understood. Ravi, a couple of emotions that I want to talk to you, but very briefly, since Bill Gates came up. I saw you and Bill on a panel that the government in India had organized, and like obviously you know Bill Gates for a while, but he's also written a very thoughtful comment on the book. Um, did he share something about the book to you privately, or something that he told you that you'd like to share with our audience? How does that work?
It's fascinating, right? So yeah, I'd done the book, and the publisher said you need some endorsements. And
Hmm.
usually, you think you try and create, go out and get 20 endorsements. And I said, I'm not going to do that. Who are the people I really admire, who I know, and can I get them to say something useful? So one of them was Bill, another Satya Nadella, Nandan, whatever, Kiran. So I wrote to them and said, look, I've written this book. Here's the PDF. Here's the summary because you're busy. And oh, by the way, to make it really simple for you, here's a draft of something you might want to say, but which you can edit. Okay. Because they are incredibly busy people.
Right.
Now, Bill actually threw out my quote. So he actually did say this. He says, as the world grows in complexity, you need to be more curious, more adaptable. And so he did speed read some sections of it and said, no, that's the essence of this. So don't give me that garbage that you. This is this is really. And so I do think um, if you think about Bill, there are some reasons to admire him. It's not just that he's very smart. There are a lot of really smart people in the world. But what over the years, one of the reasons I've admired him tremendously is incredible curiosity about everything.
Hmm.
In the days of 2003, when I was hired into Microsoft, he still used to interview every candidate. That was his quality control. So I got to be interviewed by Bill. It was supposed to be 20 minutes. It lasted close to an hour. And I remember he showed the greatest interest in the diesel engine industry that I was in.
Hmm.
So, and in every other conversation since then, in nearly 20 years, he shows the most extraordinary curiosity about every aspect of life. And I think that is so central to being successful in this century.
For sure. I mean, although I write about the passion economy a lot, and my next book is on passion economy, I think the essence is not follow your passion, it's follow your curiosity. And I think people like the many people you mentioned do embody that, including yourself, Ravi. I think you're
Oh, no.
primarily curious.
Because passion is not static. What
Exactly.
you're passionate about at 10 is different from what you're passionate about at 25 and 40 and 50 and so forth. It's a dynamic thing. So if you say follow your passion, well, it's a moving goalpost. And so
Yeah.
I think it's better to say, curiosity, because yeah, I entirely agree with you. So as I look at what I am passionate about, that has changed profoundly
Hmm.
I'm no longer so passionate about business. I used to be incredibly passionate about it, write about it in Harvard Business Review and all these places and blah. But I moved on, and today I'm passionate about so many different things, particularly human potential, which is what we're
Hmm.
talking about here.
Yeah.
How do you get more and more people to, you know, live their potential? Then I'm very passionate about climate change, which is my next adventure. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think being alive means being curious. You look at a child, incredibly curious about everything around him or her. We lose that for a variety of reasons. And it's time to become childlike again and be curious about everything.
Yeah. Congrats for taking over the Global Climate Alliance. I know it's going to be a
I'm
new
not taking over,
adventure,
I'm simply serving it.
serving the mission rather. Now,
Yeah,
Ravi,
yeah.
it's time to get a little personal. I'm going to ask you questions. Feel free to answer as much or as little as you want. All right. And this also stems, of course, from your book because that's of primary interest to me. Talk to me about career regret and envy. Two things about people that you've observed, or like people maybe you've experienced some amount of regret or envy. Because
Sure.
for us on NC, it keeps coming up. People look at other people's success and feel that, oh, wow, this person has figured out everything. What the heck am I doing with my life? So, talk to us about these two emotions.
Yeah, let me just make it very personal because, yeah, look, for the longest time, I thought I was destined to be a great CEO, uh, CEO of a very large, monstrously successful company, and all that comes with it. So, for instance, I look at Satya Nadella, and uh, here's a funny incident which I'm talking about slightly publicly. In Microsoft we do the people planning process in March.
Yeah.
Or we used to every year. And in 2007, when we were looking at the succession slate, I'd put Satya on it as my success. Now, that sounds kind of hideously unbelievable today, but back then it was feasible, particularly since Satya wanted to spend some time in India, etc. And today he's an extraordinarily successful CEO of an extraordinarily successful company. And would I want to be there? Yes, but I don't think I'm qualified to be there. Um, but the point is, uh, until some years ago, I had regret about that. But I wasn't willing to pay the tax.
Hmm.
Okay, I wasn't willing to pay what it would have taken to be the CEO of a public company. Which you have to do certain things and make certain choices. And I was too much of a maverick and too much of I had all these other interests to want to do it, and therefore there are consequences, trade-offs, if you will. So that's one. Even today, I look at these young people building some amazingly successful companies, also many amazingly bad companies, which are unicorns.
Hmm.
And then my competitive juices flow again, Utkarsh. I say, well, my friend Ashok Soota started Happiest Minds at 75, and it's a unicorn. So I can do it at 59. And then,
Hmm.
I catch myself. So there's envy, there's the competitive desire, there are all these things. But then, I've gradually sort of figured out that no, this is my path. I'm choosing it intentionally, and therefore there are upsides and consequences of that. And the upsides are on most days way better than the cost of missing out. You just look at a simple thing like money. I was paid well in my last job, but when I look at wage inflation over the decade, it has been stunning, just stunning. You know, like to like comparison is about three times. Okay. So I tried to think about it once I gave a talk and I said, I wonder how Bishan Singh Bedi thinks about when he looks at Kohli's, compensation.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's about that. And so, yeah, you feel some regret, some envy, or all these things, but you don't spend much time on it. You need to focus on your path.
Right. For as long as I've known you, seen you, you're somebody who I think manages his energy really well. And I think some part of it is time management, some part of it is choosing projects carefully, some part of it maybe willingness to make mistakes. Tell us about how you think about your day, your week, your month, and your goals.
I think the most important thing is not the day, the month, and all that. It is clarity around two things: clarity around knowing what I'm good at and what I'm not good at,
Hmm,
and clarity around knowing what I enjoy and how I make my difference. Okay. So, for instance, a long time ago, I figured out I'm a decent sort of manager and decent CEO type, but I'm not exceptional. Okay. I'm actually exceptional at a few other things. One of them, for instance, is, you know, getting people aligned behind a
hmm,
big goal and helping them achieve it. Okay. Now, from that clarity, what I'm able to do is start things or be associated with things and build great teams that benefit occasionally from my presence or guidance or networks or all that, but I don't have to be there on a daily basis or even a weekly basis. Okay, from this realization, I'm able to be involved in many more things because I'm those institutions, those projects, those missions, they're not crucially dependent on me operationally. Okay, so even in the startup that that called Game,
hmm,
uh, yeah, I'm like a very involved founder, but there's a CEO, there are two co-founders, there's a phenomenal team, they're doing great work. I've got the same model at UNICEF. I did hire the CEO. I've put together a great board. I'm on it. We built good teams, not only in headquarters in New York, but in each country. And so I get sucked in when there's a crisis, or occasionally to think about strategy, projects, or funders, or whatever these kinds of things. So I think this is kind of important. Um, Many years ago, I heard Warren Buffett.
hmm,
He was in giving a talk, and he says, "Look, I figured out in my first job that I hated managing people. Okay, and so I've done my utmost since then to not have to manage people." So he has arranged his life and built teams around him so that he can concentrate on what he is good at, what he enjoys. So I think this is the most important trick in life. And that's the most important reason why I am able to do all the things that I am involved with, have done, etc. So that's one. With that comes, you have to be able to build good teams and teams that are very good at what you are not good at. And
hmm,
then you need to be able to trust them. So I learned to be quite decent at that. And if you go to LinkedIn and see all the people who've commented on my new book, a huge number of them are people from all the companies where we work together, whether it's Cummins or Bank of Baroda or Microsoft or Infosys or wherever else. And and so it comes from fundamentally attracting good people and
hmm.
then giving them tons of freedom so that they're able to, you know, expand to their potential. So I think this is another trick. Yeah, I think a big part of the sort of good decision making and productivity and all that is also being good at saying no.
Right.
Okay, so you have to become very good at saying no to things that don't fit. Okay, they don't fit. your priorities, don't fit your values, don't fit your interests, but they'll have something that's interesting. So something comes along, it pays a great deal of money, so you get thinking about it for a nanosecond. And you say, other than the money, there's nothing here. So why would I
Hmm.
do that? Or whatever. So, so yeah, I, I think you have to get clear and intentional about saying no to things.
Absolutely. When you look at your own career and when you look at people you've enjoyed working most with, one, do you consider them to be generalists or specialists or a bit of both? And are you a generalist or a specialist or a bit of both?
Well, the second question is much easier. I'm
Hmm.
totally, 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 utterly generalist. I have uh, relatively few technical skills. Okay, and yeah, even at when I was studying my at business school 30 years ago now, I studied general management. I chose not to specialize in finance or operations or whatever it is. I was drawn towards that, and I write briefly about it in my book. I think the environment today favors generalists over specialists, but with a caveat. You and I have talked about this before, Utkarsh. I think it's helpful to have what's called a T profile, okay, where you start out developing expertise and some depth in some area, and
Hmm.
have some accomplishment in that area. And then on top of that, you become a generalist. You become good at general management. You get good at leadership. You get good at, you know, general purpose problem solving, etc. And the reason why it's important to have that T is because over the years, it gives you self confidence that you actually accomplish something significant, which you can go back to. Otherwise, this imposter syndrome creeps in. And I was
Right.
reading some new LinkedIn report which says like some astonishing percentage of today's young people feel like imposters because they're
Hmm.
not grounded necessarily in enough substantive accomplishment and expertise. So I think this anchors you, roots you, etc. But on top of that, I think it's a enormous advantage to be a very good generalist, a Swiss Army knife. You should think about a Swiss Army knife versus a carving knife.
Oh, for sure. And Ravi, before we let you go, is there anything that we should have asked you that we haven't, or any parting message for people listening to you from around the world?
I think there's so many things because look, there are a lot of ideas that I try to capture, which I think are very, very important in this moment in time. And we have had only an hour to explore this. So it's sort of like dipping your toe in the water. But you've done an extraordinary job, I think, exploring some of these areas. But I would say I wish we had had more time, and maybe we can do a follow up session on mindset, for instance.
Mindset. Yeah.
The thing that I've realized more and more over the years is how important is um, our mindset to everything in life, what we achieve, how we manifest and interact with others, how content and happy we are versus dissatisfied and unhappy, the quality of our relationship, everything stems from mindset. And so, in fact, the second chapter after I set up the whole story is about mindset. And I start, as you know, with two quotes. One from Henry Ford, who says, "Whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're
You're right.
right."
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one. And then Bill Gates, who says, "What you believe is what you achieve." So I wish we could have done more on that. I um, I wish we could have talked more about leadership
Hmm.
because at this moment in time, the most precious thing in this world, the thing we're lacking most, is just leadership. A lot more of us who are willing to step up and be part of the solution somewhere on some issue. And the model of leadership for this century is not about great people with formal power like president or CEO or whatever. It's people like you and I and everybody on this call deciding to act on some issue that is important. So if you could grant me two wishes, I would say two more episodes on these two topics.
Done. We'll definitely have you back, Ravi. I think in the fellowships, the career restart and the I don't know what I want to do with my life. And we'll definitely dive deep into mindset and leadership, two critical things. But I want to compliment you on writing an Amazon #1 bestseller. I just saw that it hit the #1 on Amazon charts today. It doesn't matter, but it's a well-deserved recognition. It's an important book. It's a timely book, and I'm actually really happy to include it in the Network Capital curriculum.
Well, I want to say thanks for two things. One is having me back on your show and making such a strong plug for the book. And look, I decided when I was writing this to price it really low, so that anybody who can afford to have a good cup of coffee shouldn't not have to think about it. And we're giving away all proceeds to charity. So I hope more people will actually take the effort to buy it. More importantly, read it. So thank you, and good luck to everybody who's listening in. And if you want to continue the conversation, join me on LinkedIn.
For sure. Thank you, Ravi. Look forward to having you back soon. And if you don't know what the heck you're doing with your life, it's okay. You have micro experiments, you have a lot of people, you have a tribe of mentors to figure it out. Thank you, Ravi. Have you back soon. Take care.
Thank you.